Okay, I think it started. Um, Welcome to this webinar on NEH's Dialogues on the Experience of War program. We will walk you through the outlines of the grant program and some sample funded projects, and then we'll provide some insight into the review process and tips for preparing your application. Okay, before we get started, I'll introduce myself and my colleague. I'm Victoria Sams. I serve as the leader for the Dialogues Grant Program, and I work as a program officer within the NEH Division of Education Programs. With me is Sarah Booney, program analyst from the Dialogues Grant Program, and you'll be hearing from her directly later. Okay. Ah, I'm sorry, I skipped a slide. Program purpose. Okay, the Dialogues on the Experience of War grant program supports the study and discussion of a wide range of humanities sources about the experience of military service and war, in the belief that such work can help U.S. military veterans and others to think more deeply about the issues that they raise and to place their own experiences in broader context. Excuse me. So we'll start with an overview of the grant program. The Dialogues program is part of the Endowment's Division of Education Programs. The division's overall mission is to improve humanities teaching and learning for all ages and in and through all kinds of educational institutions. The division's grant programs support this mission in a variety of ways. One route is through curricular, resource, and faculty development at individual institutions such as community colleges or universities. Grant programs such as our Humanities Connections and Humanities Initiatives are good examples of this route. Another way is through grant programs that support projects that build or enhance educators' understanding of a topic through their close study and discussion of humanities sources. Grant programs such as our Institutes for K through 12 educators or higher education faculty, or our Landmarks of American History and Culture workshops for teachers are longstanding examples of this. Dialogues on the Experience of War supports projects that build and further public understanding of a wide range of topics connected to the experiences of military service and war. Dialogues projects may work within, both within and outside of formal educational programs, and they may work with members of the general public or students or both. Dialogues projects can request grant funds of any amount up to $100,000. All Dialogues projects feature humanities-based discussions of the experience of war and military service. Dialogues projects must involve the training of persons either pre-selected or to be recruited by the project team, who will be designated as discussion facilitators. Following that training, the award supports the offering of at least 2 iterations of the discussion series. Applications for the current cycle will be due October 14th, 2021 for projects that could start as early as June 1st, 2022 and must start no later than September 1st, 2022. This page is what we call the Dialogues Program Resource page. Every grant program has a resource page, and this contains the links to all the materials you'll need to apply for a grant. This part of the page also has great resources for developing your ideas and for preparing your application, which we will point out in the presentation. If you scroll further down the page, you'll find a section titled Step 1, which contains the application materials, the program resources, and the sample application narrative subsections. We will return to the application materials section when we discuss the notice of funding opportunity, or what we call the guidelines for applications, later in the webinar. Looking more closely at the program resource page, this screenshot shows you where you will find some of the documents I mentioned. Within Step 1 review, you will find information and links to learn about the Dialogues Grant Program. Under the Program Resources header, you can get answers to frequently asked questions that we receive from applicants, a form for submitting a sketch or an outline of your project ideas for NEH staff feedback, and a list of recent grants made in this program. Submitting a sketch or a proposal draft is entirely optional, but entirely welcome. Below is a list of recently funded Dialogues projects. Perhaps you want to get an inside look at key parts of some successful proposals. The sample application narrative subsection below the resources subsection provides links to the materials from 4 successfully funded projects, which we will explore a bit in this webinar. These include the whole proposal narratives and some of the related materials, such as the preparatory program schedule or the syllabi for the discussion programs, but not the project budgets. We have 2 examples for each of the new or returning programs. We recommend reading all of the samples as they enable you to see a variety of topics, of types of applicant organizations, thematic approaches, and formats. And we always say that these are samples, not models. So you don't need to do exactly what they do or do it exactly how they did it. But we hope that these samples help you see how these applicants crafted a persuasive presentation and explanation of their project. Seeing a real life example may also help you as you work through how to balance breadth and depth in your proposal, how to be clear and concise and simultaneously getting across the big picture of what you're aiming at, and enough concrete specifics to show us how you'll get there. And finally, on this page, much further down, beyond steps 2 to 4, you can find still more information about the Dialogues program, such as statistics about the program history. Or say you'd like to know more about projects that have been funded in the past grant cycles. At the bottom of this page, there are links to profiles of selected projects, which illustrate how such projects unfolded once they were awarded the grant. So here we are. You may be wondering, what kinds of projects have we seen in making our awards for this program? Some illustrations can be found in this section at the bottom of the program resource page. Dialogues projects take a wide variety of forms, from discussion programs for incarcerated veterans or veterans in communal housing, to bridge programs for veterans returning to higher education, to public discussion programs led by student veterans trained through university courses. On the resource page, if you scroll to the very bottom, you can find some examples of projects funded by the program. Bonus tip, the list of the funded projects on the resource page is generated through our NEH funded projects query form, which is a tool you can use at any point to do your own searches. You can see what's been funded on a particular topic of interest using keywords or specific phrases, or at your organization or institution or in your state. You can also search for funded projects within a particular grant line across all the grant lines in a particular division, like education or research or public programs, or across the whole of the NEH over the past year, a given decade, or even the whole 50 plus years of NEH grant making. And there is a link in the document form of this webinar, which you can get to, but you can also go through the main page. Okay, so these are some examples selected from the over 70 projects that NEH has funded, and these show some of the project ideas and teams that have been successful. In this slide, you can see how some of the projects tailor their themes and selection of works in various ways. They might draw on the particular strengths of their project team or the sites and the organizations with which they work, such as this example from Minnesota Humanities Center, which uses local sites and veteran authors in their Echoes of War project. This project focused on memory and the multiplicity of stories as read through literature, memoir, and local war memorials. Another example here, Maui College drew on the work of local cultural partners in its focus on the theme of the warrior's return and on Native Hawaiian ceremonies of homecoming. Their project brought Native Hawaiian and other Maui-based veterans together to study the histories of the 18th century Hawaiian and more recent world wars in their discussion of films, lectures, and performances. Another example on this slide, Longwood University and the David J. Drakulich Foundation. These were separate projects. Both have sought to serve rural veterans and have tailored their themes and selections of works to address the experienced and often overlooked narratives of women and African American veterans. So as you can see, The Echoes of War project I described examines the roots of war in a place in its past and the echoes of war in a people and their memories. In their project, the wars in Vietnam and Iraq were studied in the context of colonial conflicts and World War I using literature, memoir, and personal histories. The Longwood University project focuses on the neglected narrative of the African American experience of war. The project will focus on the involvements of Black combat veterans in three historically distinct conflicts: the American Civil War, the Vietnam War, and the post 9/11 wars. Themes for the project include civil rights and patriotism, the role of race in war, homecoming, and the experiences of Black women in war. And the DJD Foundation project uses humanities sources and the Socratic method to introduce the topic of women's service in war, providing opportunities to build understanding about the experiences of service members and the issues that veterans face as they return to civilian life, and to promote the humanities through an exploration of women's literature. And as mentioned, the last example here, the Maui College, this integrates veterans' experiences into an ancient Native Hawaiian rite of passage for Maui County veterans. The warrior's homecoming is a moment of joy and sorrow, relief and remorse, with human responses that transcend time. Ka Maoli is an ancient Native Hawaiian practice to reintegrate male and female warriors. It consists of three stages: the rite of Ka Maoli, the choice to enter the military; Uo and Malina Kekino, integration of strengths gained through service; and third, Uo Kekino Wailua, making meaning of the experience. Okay, so this slide addresses the formats that your projects can take. And as you can see from the previous examples and the longer list of past projects, these projects take up a variety of questions and sources and ideas under a wide range of conceptual or thematic approaches. They are equally varied in the forms that they take. Preparatory programs, for example, can range from a 2-day intensive workshop to train discussion leaders to a semester-long or even year-long university course. Similarly, successful discussion programs have run as weekly seminars or monthly gatherings, as 2-week bridge programs for veterans returning to higher education, or as a series of weekend retreats. Libraries, community centers, VA hospitals, theaters, prison facilities, and educational institutions have been host venues for Dialogues programs. We will walk you through some questions that we hear often and then some sample project descriptions very briefly. You can always return to the resource page to find fuller profiles of some funded projects and the list of all the past projects to get further ideas about the range of applicant organizations, themes or topics, and program structures. Okay. Questions that we hear frequently. People frequently ask why the guidelines emphasize sustained discussion and what that means. The short answer is that the grant program is an educational program and therefore values the learning that comes from studying and discussing humanities sources in depth, over time, and in exchange with others. What we hear repeatedly about the hallmark of a successful Dialogues project is the transformative impact that they can have on those who participate in the programs, as well as on those who create them and carry them out. The duration and the format of discussion programs can vary widely, as we mentioned earlier. Successful Dialogues projects all create the space and the conditions for sustained and in-depth discussion of humanities sources on the experience of war and military service. It is on this foundation that these projects build deep connection and intellectual community and trust among their participants. The second question stems from the requirement that all Dialogues projects focus on at least one conflict from World War I and one from the period since World War I, and that they focus on at least 2 different genres or disciplines in the humanities. This emphasis on temporal breadth and genre or disciplinary diversity is rooted in the recognition that deepened understanding of the experiences of veterans depends on exposure to a broad range of contexts and a broad range of perspectives on those experiences. These basic requirements of sustained discussion, historical breadth, and variety of sources and perspectives studied should still allow prospective applicants the room to create or further develop a project that both taps into their strengths, your strengths, and serves the goals. So now we turn to some of the examples from our sample project narratives. Here's an example of a new project that involved a partnership between two organizations, in this case, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, which is a cultural organization, and the Warrior Writers Project, which is a veteran serving nonprofit organization. And it is one of the sample narratives on the webpage. So you could see how they framed their project in their proposal as well. This project shows one way that two organizations with complementary strengths can partner to create a dialogues project that benefits their wider community. Here's an example of a returning project, this one from Maine Humanities Council, funded first in 2016 and then again as a returning project in 2019. This is also one of the sample narratives provided on the resource page, so you can see how a proposal for a returning project presents ideas for building on the initial project. After initial success with the veterans discussion programs that were held in VA hospitals and other sites, these applicants expanded their project team and their collaborating partners to prepare, experienced discussion facilitators to work with veterans in the Maine justice system and to familiarize them with a breadth of humanities sources connected to their experiences of military service and of homecoming. Following this training, the discussion programs take place in 10 locations throughout the state, led by pairs of the trained discussion leaders. Maine Humanities Council's project is an example, Maine Humanities Council is an example of an organization with a mission and the capacity to serve their whole state. These discussions were veteran to veteran discussion programs that spoke to the experiences and particular challenges of those navigating the Maine justice system. The project team was able to build on the foundations of their existing preparatory and discussion program, both to expand their partnerships and to narrow their participant focus. This focus enabled the project team to empower an underserved population through providing them with a means of deeper engagement with humanities resources and connection with fellow veterans. Returning projects may build on their previous work by expanding or deepening their programs in different ways. For instance, Touchstone's discussion project, a small educational organization, expanded its workshops and discussion series into transitional housing and prison facilities in Maryland. Another returning project from St. John Fisher College deepened and refined the course it offered its student veterans and non-veterans to prepare them to lead discussions in veteran retirement homes in the greater Rochester region. Right. So this part of the presentation will roughly follow the order of our Notice of Funding Opportunity, or what we call the NOFO document, which people also refer to as the program guidelines. If you wish to follow along on your copy as we go, you can download it. This document will be your blueprint for building a strong application, so we encourage you to become very familiar with it. To access the NOFO, scroll down to that Step 1 review section of the Dialogues Program resource page under Download Application Materials. While today's presentation will not cover every detail contained in the NOFO, we will give a general overview, we'll highlight some of the most important parts, and we'll clarify some points of common confusion. All right. One area of the NOFO, when you're thinking about your topics for discussion, we have highlighted here, and agency-wide, this has been highlighted as being of special interest for NEH. These are two initiatives: a More Perfect Union, which is our special initiative advancing civic education and commemorating the nation's 250th anniversary, which is coming up in 2026. This initiative seeks to support projects that promote a deeper understanding of American history and culture, that advance civic education and knowledge of our core principles of government, and examine how our founding ideals are met in a modern pluralistic society. Applications about the contributions of underrepresented communities are highly encouraged. On page 3 of the NOFO, you can find more about this special initiative, in addition to the second initiative listed here, which is Standing Together, the Humanities and the Experience of War. This initiative is the one that Dialogues forms part of, and it is described as well in the NOFO. We should note that projects do not have to fit within or address this additional NEH area of interest. Once proposals come in, they're all on equal footing. They're judged by the same review criteria. Projects that address this initiative might generate additional attention or interest, however. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over. I'm sorry. I'll read one last slide and then I'll turn it over to my colleague. A few words here about baseline eligibility criteria for submitting an application for Dialogues on the Experience of War. And this section follows the program description section of the NOFO. If you are the project director heading the project, make sure that you're affiliated with and submitting it through an eligible organization or institution of higher education. The institution organization is the applicant, not you. And you'll see here on the slide, nonprofit organizations, institutions of higher education, state and local governmental agencies, federally recognized Native American tribal governments are all eligible. And you'll see in the slide as well, or not eligible. Okay, I will now turn over to my colleague who's going to take you through the sections on tips for a strong proposal and the review process.
Now that you know what you can and can't apply for, how can you make your application as strong as possible? We'll give you some general tips first, and then we'll dive back into some of the specifics with regard to the Dialogues on the Experience of War program. Preparation is key. First, read the guidelines. It sounds basic, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that or don't do it carefully enough. The guidelines will help you determine if this program is the right fit for what you want to do and at what level, and tell you what you need to put into your application. Next, be sure to look at the sample narratives of successful applications and other resources like the FAQ on the program resource page. We can't emphasize this enough. Talk to a program officer. Don't worry that you might be bothering us. Working with applicants is an important part of our jobs and one that we really do enjoy. It's exciting to hear about all the things you want to do, and we want to help you make your application as strong as possible. Make your case. What could making a good case look like? Here are some general principles that would hold across all our grant programs. Start with the review criteria. Show your project's intellectual significance, provide context, develop a clear and realistic work plan, and demonstrate likely impact. Remember your audience. Definitely consider the readers of your proposal. You're writing to panel reviewers, NEH staff, and the members of the National Council, who will have varying levels of expertise and experience with the subject matter and context of your project. It's very common, for example, for a review panel to include scholars and experts from different types of institutions or organizations and who work in varied disciplines and capacities. You may have humanities scholars who work in literature, history, regional studies, or art history. In Dialogues panels, you may have panelists outside the humanities who collaborate with or work at the intersection with the humanities, with relevant experience in veterans programs, for example. At least one panelist will be someone who's directed a Dialogues project, someone who can understand from the inside what it's like to grapple with not only the content, but also the logistics of making this kind of project happen. You want to be sure that your proposal is clear and accessible to an educated generalist. It's a great idea to get a colleague from outside of your field to read your proposal. As mentioned earlier, make sure your proposal addresses the review criteria in a clear and explicit way. You will find the list of criteria for Dialogues review on pages 26 and 27 of the Notice of Funding. Finally, show the reviewers what you know what you're doing, that you've thought through the project carefully, and that if your project is funded, it will be successful. This slide lists the components that make up your proposal. This gives you a sense of where your narrative fits within the whole application package. We will focus on tips for composing your narrative in this section, and then we'll discuss how the additional attachments complete the story. In the NOFO, you'll find a crosswalk that we've screenshotted here from page 11, relating what you have to write in the sections of the narratives to the areas of the review criteria that apply. The narrative is the weightiest part of your application because it carries the bulk of the intellectual content of your proposal. You don't get to be in the room to explain your project, so let the narrative be the main force that does that for you. Here are some rules and tips. Limit your narrative to 15 pages for a new project, and if you're a returning project, 16 pages. Carefully address or answer the items under each section header. Your narrative should present a capsule summary of the project in section A, essentially the brief version of who, what, where, when, and why. If you are proposing a returning project, you must fill out section B. If you are proposing a new project, then skip this section. For all applicants, section C is the heart of your narrative. Here's where you present all the elements of your project. Note, the Dialogues grant program is prescriptive about two key elements: the requirement for temporal historical breadth in the choice of wars in focus, and the demand that the sources discussed be drawn from at least two genres. Your intellectual rationale should connect these elements in a way that explains your project's purpose and logic. Here's where you would explain the thematic, focus, and comparative approach, your reasons for the selections you make, and your goals for the project. How you design components of your project, such as the preparation of your discussion leaders or the structure of your discussion series, will depend on factors particular to your project team, project focus, and prospective participants. Your proposal narrative, therefore, should also tell the story of who you are as a project team. It should help your reader to understand how your project is guided by your project team and its specific experience, strengths, values, and by your organization or institution with its particular resources and, if applicable, mission. Any plans to collaborate with other partners or organizations should be described. It should tell a story of what kinds of veterans and other participants you plan to work with and how you are trying to serve them, of where things stand now with regard to the humanities work and veteran serving work done at your organization and in your community, and of where you want to be and what you want to build. And of course, the narrative should tell the story of how your proposed project will use the time and funding from this grant opportunity to get there. This will be more specifically addressed in your work plan. You may have to do some of that only briefly and selectively within the narrative, using highlights or examples, because you can't give us all of the details within those 15 pages, but you want to tell us what we need to know, and then use the other attachments to flesh out that story and give us confidence in your success. Keep the review criteria at hand throughout your application process. They're on page 26 and 27 of the NOFO, so you'll be keeping in mind the ways that the peer reviewers and others at NEH will be asked to think about your proposal. So, how can you do the best job of this within your Dialogues proposal? Pay close attention to the bullet points underneath the categories of review criteria. Intellectual quality stands first and foremost amongst these. Because if your project isn't worth doing in terms of its intellectual focus and content, then it won't matter how organized you are or how many people it might affect. But if you do have a great intellectual focus for your project, you also have to combine that with a feasible design that can get the job done and that will have a significant impact. So they're all important to address fully in your application. Given the continuing uncertainties stemming from the pandemic, you may want to consider how the implications of COVID-19 may figure into your projects, as this is something reviewers may take into consideration when weighing your application against the review criteria of feasibility. In general, look at what's written here and be sure that an intelligent reader will have strong positive answers to how well your proposal addressed each of them. Ideally, they'll be won over by the time they finish reading your narrative, and then their positive assessment will be strengthened by what they find in the other attachments that follow it. Here's a screenshot from pages 7 and 8 of the Notice of Funding to show you how these different components will need to be included in your ultimate grants.gov submission as PDFs that have the exact file name given here and that observe the page limits indicated. Keep this at hand as a checklist for the items you must include. The hyperlinks within the NOFO will take you directly to the instructions for that section of the application. So read carefully what it is that you're being asked to submit in each attachment, and you should be in great shape. Don't overdo it. Remember that human beings are reading these applications, so well-curated pages summarizing your preparatory and discussion programs and a work plan that is clear and concise will be more valuable than exhaustive detail about your institution or plans not directly relevant to your project. But do use these attachments strategically. For instance, help your reader to see more precisely how your preparatory program will unfold and what resources you will provide your discussion leaders, or use your discussion program attachment to lay out clearly the intellectual content of your discussion program, sessions, and the way you plan to approach it. Please note that we are using the research and related budget form, which you will fill out in your grants.gov workspace. The budget form will automatically integrate into your application, so you no longer have to include it as an additional attachment. Because this is a government-wide form, be sure to read the NOFO guidelines on how exactly to fill it out for the specific grant program's purposes. You can see pages 12 to 19 of the NOFO for all the details. Other things to note. All projects are required to submit a budget justification to complement the budget form itself. The budget justification will get attached as part of the budget form. Be sure to title this file correctly and save it as a PDF to ensure that it successfully integrates into the application file for your reviewers to see. Some budget advice. Consult the budget guidelines. Know or ask what isn't allowed. Talk to a program officer in the Division of Education Programs, and you will need to designate someone on your project as the grant administrator. If you are a higher ed institution, this will likely be someone from a sponsored research or external grants office. If you are applying through a nonprofit organization, this would be someone distinct from the project director who could manage the financial reporting and related management of the grant. Some funding restrictions. On page 25 and 26 of the NOFO, you will find a full list of the funding restrictions. Some are dialogue specific, while others are restrictions that apply across the endowment. Discussion series comprise entirely of public-facing programs or events that do not involve sustained discussion of humanities sources, the preparation of courses for high school students or a program of studying higher education. For applicants wishing to focus on curricular development projects at higher education institutions, consider the Humanities Connections or Humanities Initiatives programs. Projects that fall outside of the humanities, including the creation or performance of art, creative writing, autobiographies, memoirs, and creative nonfiction, and empirically based social science research or policy studies. And even in this kind of cross-disciplinary growth program, the NEH cannot fund projects whose main focus falls entirely outside of the humanities. We most often see this with projects whose main outcome or central focus is the creation or performance of art, or having participants produce creative writing, autobiographies, memoirs, or creative nonfiction. We also sometimes see this with projects with outcomes focused in the non-humanistic or empirical social sciences, such as those who deal with social science research or policy studies. Collaborating across boundaries is great, but if these sorts of areas are your project's main thrust, you may want to be looking to the NEA or NSF, or to nonprofits that support this kind of work rather than the NEH. Some other funding restrictions. The NEH cannot fund the promotion of particular political, religious, or ideological points of view, advocacy for a particular program of social or political action, or support of specific public policies or legislation. The best antidotes to this are to include diverse and varied voices, scholars, and sources on any topic, and especially current social or political hot topics. Present participants with unbiased information and allow them to draw their own conclusions based on that information. Root modern hot topic issues in the humanities, especially history, and focus on that humanities content in your application. And avoid buzzwords, language and goals related to advocacy and activism, especially for hot topic issues. What you might see as humanities scholarship, a reviewer might see as advocating for a particular cause, By being aware of these differing viewpoints, you can hopefully build a stronger application that readers from any background or perspective will agree is a good fit for this grant program. Some information on deadlines. So once you know what to do, here's a timeline for some of when to do it. We are accepting optional draft proposals or materials for feedback until September 8th. If you have a full draft of your narrative, we're happy to review that. You can send drafts of other attachments that are most relevant, such as the work plan and syllabi for readings, if you like, and they may be looked at alongside the narrative if time permits. It's also fine if you don't have a complete draft, but would still like to get feedback from a program officer that can help you strengthen your application. You can send a project summary, a work plan draft, a partial draft that gives us a sense of your project, and we'll be ready to meet with you where you are and respond within a time frame that allows you to incorporate our feedback. Final applications are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on October 14th, 2021. Don't wait until the last minute in case of technical issues and to account for processing time to validate in the grants.gov system. The very first thing you should do after this webinar is ensure that you have 3 important things: active DUNS and SAM numbers, current registrations and passwords for grants.gov, because NEH will not grant deadline extensions for delayed registration. Registration in these systems can take up to a month to complete, so check on this straight away, especially if you are a first-time applicant or if your institution hasn't applied for federal funding in several years. Remember, you are applying as an institution, so you will need to have the proper roles and authorities assigned to you in grants.gov to access and apply through your institution's application workspace. Your institutional grant administrator or other grants management or sponsored program staff at your institution are great contacts for guidance if you're not sure where to find this information or who to contact for access. If they cannot help you, contact the Federal Service Desk and/or grants.gov directly using the contact information on page 30 of the NOFO. Attend to details. For this program, you will need to provide supporting materials like the plan of work, CVs, and letters of commitment and of institutional or organizational support. These materials show the reviewers that you have the necessary support and planning to do what you've said you're going to do. Sometimes applicants leave these supporting materials to the last minute, which is a mistake. If at all possible, send a preliminary draft by the draft deadline. A program officer will follow up with you and provide comment. Again, getting comments from a program officer is no guarantee that you'll be funded, but we can discuss your sketch with you and anticipate the types of questions reviewers are likely to ask. It seems obvious, but do proofread your proposal. You'd be surprised how many people don't. Lack of proofreading alone probably won't think a proposal, but it does make your work seem sloppy to reviewers who may then wonder if other aspects of your project will suffer from a similar lack of care. You don't want the reviewers asking those types of questions of your project. It can be hard to see your own typos since your brain will fill them in, so have a friend or colleague or two read your proposal. Now we're going to walk you through the review process and timeline for what happens after you submit your proposal. It's a careful, multi-step process. At NEH, we make grants based on a peer review process. The first and foundational step is the peer review panel. Once the deadline has passed, we bring together groups of scholars, humanities professionals, and other experts to read and assess the proposals. They provide ratings and comments for each proposal that NEH staff then uses to come up with a set of funding recommendations. The panels will convene in December 2021, and NEH staff will send their recommendations forward early in the new year, in January or February of 2022. We then present those recommendations to the National Council on the Humanities, a group of 26 people nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate, who meet several times a year to advise us on grant making and policy. The recommendations of the staff and the council are all presented to the chairman, who by law makes all funding decisions. Dialogues proposals will be considered at our March 2022 council, after which the chairman will make the decisions, with applicants being notified in April of 2022 as to whether they were successful or not. Funded projects may then start as early as June 2022 and must start by September 1st, 2022. Not funded, regardless of the outcome, you can get the most out of your relationship with the NEH by asking for your review comments. Your review comments can often be very helpful, and it's not uncommon for an unsuccessful proposal to be funded on a subsequent application. Contact us for additional feedback or guidance. Serve as an NEH panelist. You can reach out to us to let us know you're interested in serving for a particular grant program or in general, which could offer you even further insight. And finally, consider applying again for this and other grant opportunities. So questions. With that, here's our contact information, which is also listed on the program page on the NEH website and in the notice of funding. Given that we are still working from home, email is the best and quickest way to reach us. Also, for your future reference, this slide can also serve as a crib sheet of how to contact the different divisions at NEH when you have questions about their grant programs, work, etc. Again, for now, email is generally better than phone, but this way you have it on hand for any future inquiries. And that is all for us today. Thank you for joining this webinar, and we look forward to reviewing your applications.
Thank you.